There you go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching. Welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted to be joined today by Charlie Panayi, who is the CEO of Red Squirrel Property. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me. And most importantly, congratulations on winning the Outstanding Contribution Award at Agents Giving recently. I mean, 12 challenges in what was it, 10 months?
It was a bit more than 12 as well in the end. But that was the official title.
Absolutely incredible. So really well deserved, and congratulations. And thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really grateful. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in property and agency? And I know you do loads of entrepreneurial stuff and charity stuff as well, which we'll touch on. But tell us about your property journey.
So to be fair, I decided I was going to do property at 7 years old, not estate agency, but property. And, you know, I genuinely started saving from the age of 7. So I would be like, hey, mum, dad, don't give me that Easter egg you were going to give me. Give me the pound coin you were going to give me. And that's where it started. I don't know why. You know, I was either clever or weird, one of the two. And I literally just started saving. You know, I started working at 12. I worked in Iceland. I worked in yachting restaurants and casts where I could get tips. I just worked really, and then I bought my first property at 18. So I literally lived and breathed property from the age of 7. Weirdly, I was never had. And this is going to be relatively direct for those agents listening, but I never had any interest in becoming an estate agent. It was never a thing that I thought I would do or own an estate agency, but it genuinely come about because of my passion for property. And obviously I own lots of property, I help people buy property, and I help people invest. It sort of made natural sense to have an agency. And this is a bit people might not like. I didn't like estate agents. There was a handful I trusted. But the reality is a lot of that I come across just done things for their own pocket rather than doing it for the right reasons. So that's where Red Squirrel was founded, really, on those core family values of, you know, what we say, honesty, trust, and compassion. I treat everyone the way I would want to be treated. That's sometimes direct, but that is how I want. I want transparency and compassion. So that's where it come from, really. So yeah, I lived and breathed it. I literally wanted to learn everything about property from the age of 7. And then it was like a natural progression to have an agency, because if I own properties all over the country, I should have a company that can manage them. And then if I want to sell properties, which I don't sell, but the theory was if I want to sell, I want an agent I can trust. Who better to have than someone I own or work with, you know? So it's sort of come from there, really. And you know, we've handpicked the people we want to work for us over the years. We have taken a few estate agents from other companies. Mostly our agents come from a property background of non-estate agency, but that's where it come from. So I've gave you the shortened version, but that is where it come from.
Okay, so can I take a step back? Okay, so working from 12 in Iceland and restaurants and cafes and stuff like that, what lessons did you learn from there about customer service?
So I think, again, whether I was a weird child or again, clever, whatever way it was, I just used to watch the way people dealt with individuals. And actually, it's got worse over the course of years in England and certain other countries, but England specifically. The level of respect is very thin. And that was the bit I used to struggle with. You know, you don't know what this person's going through or the good and bad they live. So actually, just be nice to everyone and be respectful and be honest, because I used to see people tell people what they wanted to hear with no intention of ever doing it. Well, that's not fair. That's not respectful. That's also lying. So I used to see from a young age, and I've got to be careful not to name people, but specifically if we go back to the Icelands and those environments, there was a lot of people that worked in those environments that actually were just ticking boxes. They were just turning up to go home. And for me, it always baffled me, because if you put in a good shift, whatever it is you're doing, whether you enjoy it or you hate it, if you actually just go into it 100%, your day goes quicker. So did I like stacking shelves and breaking up cardboard boxes at Iceland? No. But I made sure I enjoyed it, because then my 6, 7, 8, 9 hour shifts went far quicker than me twiddling my thumbs thinking, oh, woe's me, things could be better. And that's the way I looked at it. So I used to see that from a young age and think, well, that's not customer experience. If that's what you believe customer experience is, not Iceland specifically, actually, they were better than some of the places I've worked with. But in general, I just used to see it. And the same in the waiting world. You see some people who didn't want to take plates out, didn't want to do this. The amount of money they missed out on, because in specifically in wine waiting in the yachting events, you could get some really good tips. So you sit out the back thinking, oh, I'm going to try and avoid any bit of work I can. You're missing out on hundreds and hundreds of pounds a night. So yeah, I think I learned those lessons quite early doors, that actually by being fair, being honest, being transparent, you get far further in life than you will blaming other people.
100%. So you've bought your first property at 18. Just interesting to know how you were treated as an 18-year-old coming into an agency office and saying, I'd like to buy an investment property.
Well, this is probably coming back to why I disliked estate agents. The level of respect was just like, oh, you haven't got the money. Why don't you ask to check that before you decide that I did? So there is certain agents, and I definitely won't name on this, that I will not buy a property with them, even if they had on for £1 and it was my dream home. I just wouldn't do it, because there was a handful of them that were really terrible. And what I've come to learn is actually that's just the way they work in general, some of them. But to me, as my first experience, there was no respect. There was no customer care. There was no effort. It was only one of them, the worst one. It was funny because when they realised I could buy properties, then they started bothering with me. But obviously, I put them straight. I said, look, it doesn't matter what you do, what you offer me, I will never buy a property for you, ever. And that stuck with me since. I still haven't bought a car. There's been properties they've instructed before Red Squirrel existed. I asked competitor agents, I give them a written letter saying, I will buy that house for this much. You get it on the market, I buy it. And I did it. So, so I think for me, it was probably my founding experience of a state agency was no respect. And I'm a respect-driven person. Not everyone makes mistakes, but I think, treat everyone as you would want to be treated. If someone's coming into your office with a can of beer and a cigarette hanging out of their mouth, that's different. They're not respecting your environment. Outside of that, treat everyone the same, because you don't know when you can help them.
Couldn't agree more. What do you think needs to change then? Because we are way too transactional in this country. We sell a property and we're great deals done. That's it. Don't need to ever worry about that person again. Taking the money, forget them. Whereas actually here it should be a client for life. And everybody that deals with us, actually, even if they don't buy or rent for us, should still become a client for life and a raving fan, because they get that excellent customer experience. What needs to change in this country, and how's it going to change?
Oh, this is quite a deep question and can get me in trouble, but it comes from education. If we think in England now, and parenting, education and parenting, if we look at England now, the education system probably always actually has only ever taught us to be employees. It doesn't want us to think outside the box. So we already become transactional from a very young age, because we're already being taught how to just be a good employee, not how to think about how money works, how to look after money. Because when you start thinking about life and thinking about how I want to live, money's important. It does make you happy, but it definitely helps you be happy. So we don't teach kids this. And then when we look at parents, and again, I am a direct speaker, but I in the past used to pick up my stepdaughter, and the amount of times I would see, and it was mums. There was only 2 dads who used to go and pick up kids. So the mums, and they were there looking at their phones, not engaging with their children. And when a 6 or 7-year-old runs out of school, all they want to do is talk to their parent. They literally want to come and tell you whatever nonsense they're going to tell you, And as a parent, your job is to engage with them. And the amount of times I used to watch and see, they're just looking on their phone, not even engaging. So again, there's lots of problems when we come to education and parenting, I think, in terms of how we want to build this up. So we build a transactional mindset before we've even got into work. So then how can we expect the general population to then suddenly leave that transactional mindset to thinking, okay, how do I create customers for life? I may not be able to help Mr. and Mrs. Smith who walk in today, but if I help them understand how they can help themselves, that in 1 year, 10 years, whenever they can do business, they're only going to use me. And that's the bit where I think to really change that, we need to change the whole parenting system, the whole educational system, the level of respect, you know. Even, I'm not saying the police are in the right and wrong all the time, but if the police can't say boo to someone without getting in trouble now, you know, and I think there's lots of foundations that have been ruined in the English society that creates this. So I think, unfortunately, it's a far bigger job than will probably be solved in my lifetime, your lifetime, and maybe even my son's. So,
okay. So coming back, just what interests me as a landlord, and you said you're a multi-landlord, so I'm going to go slightly off track here, rather than speak about agency, but I'm going to bring it back to agency. But I'm just interested as a landlord, because we get a lot of letting agents here, and, you know, I know you've got your own agency, but can I pretend you don't have an agency?
yeah.
Okay. And some of the agents, so presumably you've bought loads of properties through various different agents. Just out of interest, and I'm very curious here, how many of those agents have come back to you, asked you a question to say, Charlie, I know you're an investor, I know you buy plenty of properties, so obviously you've got a big property empire. When was the last time any of your last letting agents offered to take you for a coffee to maximize your investments?
I think it's relatively awkward in my local areas because they know I am. So if I go outside of that, completely depends on what type of company I use. If I use a genuine agency that was founded from lettings, i.e. these guys were property people that actually owned properties and then had the sales side attached to it, then those guys tend to ask because they understand the whole cycle of a property journey. If I think of the corporate agencies, I don't remember the last time. There's the one, actually, I will name them, Patterson's up north. They were the last ones that actually said, hey, we've got a tenant for you. Can we rent it for you? Come and have a talk with us, see if we can help you. That's the last one that really, I know they asked for the business. I think you should just ask to go for coffee, let's have a chat. But at least they actually ask the questions. So I think it comes back to, if there's no commission in the pot for them, they ain't going to ask. And that's about that, because it comes back to that transactional system. So no, I don't remember, bar Patterson's, that one gent there. I couldn't tell you. But I do find more independent ones do.
Yeah, I mean, presumably you're interested in maximising your investment.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is what I don't understand.
Yeah. Listen, I get it. I think, but and then if you think of it, most estate agencies haven't bought or owned their own portfolios. Most estate agents, so they don't really understand the letting side. If you think most agencies have a letting arm because they thought, oh, I can make money in lettings, doesn't mean they know anything about lettings. So I think that's the problem. I think they don't really know. So it's hard to really, and unless you're getting the right training about how to engage with people and how to create this customer for life, because landlords are very different to selling your house. If you have a owner in your, or you go to value a owner's home and you tell them what you want to hear, what they want to hear, and give them all the fluff in the world, and then overvalue it, and then undervalue your services, you'll probably list it. If you do that with a landlord, a general landlord, there is still landlords you can do that with. The general landlord doesn't get as interested in that side of it. They actually want to know you know what you're doing. Obviously, the new landlords tend to fall for it, but experienced investors and landlords can see straight through that and cut straight through it. So I think that's where the issues lie, really.
Okay, so as a landlord, putting your letting hat on, you know, what are you looking for in a letting agent? You know, what appeals to you? What makes a good letting agent?
So for me, if I was going to use one, I'd want to know I've not got any hidden costs, because that's the first thing I would look at, knowing what the environment's like. But actually, I would ask certain questions. We actually send this out to all of our evaluations, even though it might help other agents. We tell them what questions to ask, because if they don't understand the basics of legalities, and landlords might think, yeah, but I don't know all of them. Okay, but still quiz the ones you do know. And maybe Google ones, and then just see if they get them right. So I'd always ask all the basic legality questions. I'd ask about how often they do inspections. I'd ask how the reporting works from that inspection. If you've done an inspection today, when am I going to hear about it? How am I going to hear about it? Those are the things I want to know. because it's my investment. I'm not going to pay you 10, 12, whatever percent a month to do nothing. And I think not enough newer landlords, and some of there's people like to think they're saving money by negotiating down to 9%. Actually, you're better off paying 12% to a good agent than 9% to a rubbish agent. They don't always ask those questions. So for me, that's what I'll be asking, the basics of legalities. And that you might think, why would I not ask anything more technical? Because you'd find it scary how few actually know the basics of legalities. So if they already don't know them, you know not to touch them.
Okay, so a lot of landlords are selling at the moment with what's going on, with a maybe change of government, maybe not with change of government, but everything that's going on. Agents listening to this, how are they going to find new landlords to replace those?
I guess this is very area dependent, to be fair, because if you're thinking about the Surrey areas, that's going to be quite tough to replace those landlords because the mortgage rates have actually come down. So again, it's understanding your numbers, not just thinking, how do I sell this property? Understand how the lending's working and the mortgage rates are really affecting it. And that's the key, is really understanding your numbers. I have been approached by people that have worked for me, to be fair, but they've been educated, work for me, and people that haven't worked for me say, hey, this is a great deal of numbers, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, do you even know what an investor looks for? I said, because this is the numbers you need to know, not that. Just because it's 20 grand under market value doesn't mean it's a good investment for an investor. There's lots of other factors. So I think the key to trying to replace them is really understanding the numbers and what an investor's numbers is, not an estate agent's numbers are. And also trying to think outside the box. But like I said, I think it's area dependent, because if you're in Surrey areas, I can see that being relatively tough. If you're down on the south coast or up north, I've not seen any slowing down of investors. It's still as active as I've ever seen it. It's just more those middle pockets, the higher value properties. Obviously, we're instructing landlords to sell at the moment because the mortgage rates are making it difficult. But really understand that. And if you don't understand that, understand how to project capital growth, which most agents don't know how to do either. They might just tell you a number, it's going to go up by 9%, but how is it going to go up by 9%? Be able to demonstrate and explain that. And if you can, you might be able to find a replacement investor. But the reality is you're going to need an investor now in those areas, in the more expensive areas, we'll call it. You're going to just need a landlord that just wants to own in there to say they own there. Not because it makes sense numbers-wise. But at least if you can demonstrate the numbers and demonstrate the projections and really understand what you're talking about, you've got a better chance.
Okay, so I love what you're saying, everything. So I'm a letting agent. Where do I find those growth numbers? Where do I find what's going to happen with capital growth? Where's the information? Just to help people that are watching this.
So there's a lot of I mentor 12 people a year, and actually part of the mentorship, I go through the whole structure of how to really do the due diligence, not an estate agent's valuation, it's a proper due diligence on the ripple effect. So if you think about what you need to try and understand, it's a lot of information, so I'm not allowed to go through that. But if you think about how did London's ripple effect feed all the way out to Reading, Winchester, and that's what you need to try and understand is, what's the regeneration in this area? What commitments have they got in this area? What investment have they got in this area? Just because you live in that area or live on that road does not make it the best investment. Really understand what's being put into your location or wherever you're thinking about investing in. Look at crime rates. You might think you know the area, but it doesn't mean you do. So look at crime rates, because certain amounts of crime is fine because crime's everywhere. But, high violent crime in a direct area, it's probably a warning to you to say, that's probably not a good sign. But there's so many foundations to look at. But realistically, the simplest, before you go into the real detail, is just really understanding what investment is coming into this area. Because if there's going to be a ripple effect, there has to be investment. There has to be a commitment from someone, whether that's the local government or overseas investors or whatever. There has to be an investment coming into the area to have a projected growth. Or if you rewind back to 2019, I've done a talk to, there's 140, 50 people in this room. And I said to them, you should be buying on the Isle of Wight right now. And everyone looked at me like, why? I was like, Brexit. They didn't know about COVID at this point, but this was in December 2019. And I said, Brexit is going to drive the Isle of Wight forward. Why? Because all those people that were going to Spain, Cyprus, wherever else are going to think about comparable type of living. And the closest comparable is the Isle of Wight. Then COVID happened. And that was like a perfect storm for the Isle of Wight, because suddenly you have people think about lifestyle and Brexit all together, and it boomed. So the ones who listened to me in that room are still thankful now, and they still buy me drinks and beers here, there, and everywhere. The ones who didn't listen to it are probably regretting it. But that's, you know, I didn't have the crystal ball. I didn't know COVID was going to happen. But what I did know from historic trends and whatnot, that the Isle of Wight market was inevitably going to grow because of Brexit. And we were still so far off Portsmouth and Southampton as a location. So yeah, it's about understanding your areas as well.
Okay, thank you. I want to bring it back now. I want to come back to your core values. So you talked about honesty, trust, and compassion. Where do those core values come from?
Probably my Greek upbringing, to be fair. Greeks are very, very old school, quite religious. I mean, I'm not a religious guy myself personally, but you know, they're quite old school in that, and they're very respect driven. You know, to give a good example, my uncle will not ring me, even if he wanted to speak to me, and he misses me. It's the youngers of the family are meant to reach out to the elders. Obviously, he will if it's an emergency or life or death, but that's just how we were brought up. It's very respect-driven environment, and my dad was a very old-school Greek as well, and very strict, and you know, he wasn't afraid if you stepped past his line of being disrespectful, then you would know about it. There would be a belt or a stick that would tell you about that. And to be fair, it didn't really bother me because I understood quite early doors. Even if I remember a teacher I was relatively disrespectful to once as a child, and they were in the wrong. But my dad pointed out to me, I got a bit of a hiding, but my dad pointed out to me, he said, it's my job to deal with that. If they're in the wrong, you talk to me. You don't go being rude to someone. So I think, and my mum is an incredibly loving person. So I think it comes from my parents and my environment. You know, growing up in a Greek environment in North London, all my Greek family around me, it's a very different environment and different culture to how you treat people. So I think it comes from that. Doesn't mean all Greeks are nice. Doesn't mean all Greeks are compassionate. But I just think as a culture, it is very much more respect driven. And if you respect people, you start to think about the trust and the compassion and the honesty side of things.
So what are the lessons that you've learned from building up your agency, finding, you know, you talked about getting people from outside the industry into the industry. How have you gone to recruit, and how have you built your business to where it is today?
So the lessons, gosh, you could write multiple books on that, couldn't you? I don't get involved in all the nonsense. That was I didn't from the start, but I learned pretty quickly. There's a lot of nonsense. You know, we've been called dead squirrel by competitors, and I'm like, why would you even? Now, unfortunately, some people get involved in that nonsense and start competing in that nonsense. For me, I just stayed in my lane, and we focus on ourselves. I think that's the biggest side. And again, the lessons you learn is not always to trust individuals, and I actually mean sellers or landlords, because I think more in our early days we were far more lenient in the way we done our contracts, the way we done the terminology. But again, coming back to the culture of England, we're into this realm of wanting to sue each other. So those were hard lessons to learn, because as an honest company who will give trust and will be compassionate, we probably at times got taken advantage of by certain individuals. But that, unfortunately, that means we have to now do things always in a certain way. And then when it comes down to employing people, I think that's been the toughest thing for me. As you mentioned, I'm quite an entrepreneur outside of Red Squirrel, so I do lots of things, and in those worlds, I always have similar sorts of people surrounding me. So it's very easy. I genuinely find it very easy. In our world of employing people to come and work in an agency, unfortunately, yeah, you do. It is tough. So what I look for, and it does make our life a little bit harder in terms of training. But what I try and look for is actually good people. Now that might sound really basic, but I look for good people that have rented a house, sold a house, bought a house. So they've got genuine understanding of what it feels like when you miss out on your dream home, when a sale falls through last minute, when you're told a load of nonsense from someone that doesn't know what they're talking about. I want those people. So it's tough, but actually, if you look across the line, a lot of them retired now, but you think about Karens and Wendy's and Tony's, people who worked for me over the years, Liam, who's our lettings manager now. These are people I've known for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, sometimes before they've even worked for us. But I know them. I know how they work. I know how they perform in their current employment. I know their ethos. I know them like that. So that bit's been tough because it's trial and error. Sometimes you bring people on that you think could do that, and the reality is they've got all the fundamentals. I had a good friend who worked for me 2 or 3 years ago that had everything you could want. Bought a house, great career, done similar type of roles, that transferable skills. He just couldn't get to the speed of agency. Anyone that works in agency will realise the speed of how you have to work and the multiple things getting thrown at you left, right, and centre. That you do need to be able to. Thomas, who used to work for us, he said duck and dive. He loved it, duck and dive, and that's been tough. When we're taking agencies from other people, I've actually found that far easier, and the reason being is there's very few of them. So the ones I want, I know they're good people. I know they're good at their job, and that's because I've never heard a bad word about them. And when you value houses, thousands and thousands of houses, you get told lots of stories about lots of people. So when you don't hear negative experiences of certain individuals, then that's a good sign. But I've been quite fortunate. All the agents we have employed are a handful of ones I would only have employed. And on each of those occasions, they reached out to me directly via LinkedIn and said, look, I really want to work for you one day. And that was the director of Fine & Country, another manager of a very successful high-end agencies. So actually, we've been quite fortunate. I've not even had to look for them; they've just come to me. But to be fair, these were people I would have had anyway. So I think that I've found easier because it sounds harsh, but there's less I want. But when we're doing it our normal way of employing externally, it's a super tough process to read. It's very personal as well. When you have to let someone go who really is a good person and had all the what you thought transferable skills. And that's happened more often than I'd like, but I've got to do what's right for my customers, not for them sometimes.
Couldn't agree more. Coming back, you talked about mentorships, and I know you said you mentor 12 people a year. Why do you think mentoring's really important, and who mentors you, or how did you get on that road?
So I think the reason I find it really important is I accidentally fell into mentoring people. I didn't realise I was doing it. 10 years ago, I started getting paid to do lots of international speaking because of my background and success at a young age. So naturally, I started helping people without even realising it. But what I realised was there was a gent I helped quite some time ago now, years and years ago. What I told him in one day took me 7 years to figure out. Now, in 7 years, I could have earned a ton load more money. And it's not all money driven, but that's the reality. I would have earned a ton load more money if I just paid him or me that money to just tell me those answers. I'm not cheap, but what I gave that gent took me 7 years. So what I figured was when I was young and 18, I was earning good money. I was an account director at 17. I was managing millions of pounds. So I was earning good money. So you telling me how to invest my money into property at that age, I used to be a bit more ignorant in terms of like, hey, I'm earning good money, I'll buy what I want. But yeah, if I could turn back time, I would have got someone like me to just tell me all the things not to do. And I would have sped up all of the things that I took 10 years to do, I would have done in probably 2. And I mean that, I genuinely would have done more in 2 years. It took me 10. So I think that's the importance. And also it's quite a lonely road. If you're a business owner, or high-level exec, it can feel very lonely because it's tough. People see the success part and they want that, but they don't envy anything else that comes before that. So I think that's where also good mentors or coaches or friends or family members help as well. And I think I realised that from family. So I could see growing up what my dad was good at, what he wasn't good at, what my mum was good at, what she wasn't good at, what they couldn't offer me, my uncle could offer me. What my uncle couldn't offer me, I was always from a young age putting myself in rooms of people that could show me how to do things that I couldn't do. Always did it. So I think people get a bit ignorant. They see, and unfortunately, I think this is actually sort of COVID's fault. When COVID happened, we had suddenly loads of property experts appear on Instagram. And some of those experts pay me for advice. And then they go and sell that to that. No, look, that's their business model, so it's fine. But they're not experts. Some of these people that say they're experts have never bought a house in their lives. So I get why you might be skeptical about getting a mentor in the property world. But what I can tell you, if you find someone who actually is genuinely where you want to be, they are going to speed up your path to getting there by God knows how much. I mean, like I said, there's a few people I've started working with recently, and all of them will say what I gave them in a week took them years to figure out. So I think mentorship is really important for multiple reasons. One, to speed up your journey, but two, also to support you on those lonely points. And when you do have struggles and your mental fitness gets affected a little bit, you have people around you that can be supportive, because a good mentor will be there for you forever. Even when my guys stopped working with me after a year, I'm still there. I still talk to them. They ping me a WhatsApp today, I will still respond to them. So we become friends. So I think that's why it's really important. I think people undervalue it. And sometimes I had someone recently saying they think they're too small fry for me to mentor them. I was like, there's no such thing. I've worked with people who've got no money, and I've worked with people who've got billion. The reality is I'm just here to support. If I don't believe I can help you, and that's where a good mentor works as well. They're honest about, can they help you? I will always have a meeting. If they're not doing they all call it different things, but a discovery meeting with you to really understand, can I help you? Then they probably just want your money. If they're sending you the bank account straight away, send me the money, that they're probably not the right person. You want to sit with someone who's going to make sure they can get you to where you need to be. Because if I can't, I'm going to tell you who can. If you tell me you want some support in this area and I don't think I can support that, I will know someone that can support you in that. And treat it as an investment. I've paid a gentleman. Nowadays, most of my mentors are friends, because I work in an environment where I do work with lots of millionaires and multimillionaires and then successful people. And then I've got my mum and then I've got my childhood friends. But there was something I didn't know in the HMO space a couple of years ago. And I couldn't figure out how this guy was doing something that I couldn't do. I've got 3 industry leader awards in Europe for property. So I'm thinking, what is he doing? Now, rather than me spend however long trying to figure out what it was, I just phoned him. I said, how much do you want to teach me to do what you're doing? So there's no arrogance there. It's just, tell me. And he said, if you give me 12 grand, I'll go through it with you. I was like, give me a bank account. I sent him 12 grand. He took a couple of days worth of stuff. And I've made that 12 grand investment at least £400,000 profit. At least. Because I don't know how long that would have took me to figure out. That could have took me 5 years. Instead, I knew it in 2 days. And so I think when you get arrogant and above yourself, then you start to lose out as well. So mentorship's good in lots of different ways. But it doesn't always have to be paid mentorship. If you have a good family member, friend, associate that you work around and you think is really good at something, bend their ear and just ask them. If you're an agency, don't go thinking you know more than your best performer, because you probably don't, because there's a reason they're the best performer. So instead, become that cleaner ass. Ask that person how they're doing, why they're doing it. Most people are quite happy to share with you how they're doing it, but just answer those questions.
Okay, coming back. A couple of final questions, because I'm very
I've got time.
Conscious of time. Books then. What books would you recommend people or podcasts to listen to?
I think the foundation book for most people, and to be fair, I've read it twice in my last 13 years, but there's a Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I just think it's a great book to teach people how to understand money. Doesn't give you the answers, but it definitely is that key to really getting your brain ticking. I can't remember. I think it's someone EL he wrote a book a few years ago called Indistractable. That's a great book as well. It is some really basic techniques, because I think the problem in the modern world is we're distracted by everything. We want to look good, we want to pretend to look good, we want to pretend to feel good. We're distracted by our phones, our watches, our everything. So that's a really good book as well. There's loads of good books, but I think those two, like The Rich Dad Poor Dad, is the foundation of books for me in the business world. And then something that people look past, because they always go to these self-help books, which I read all the time, but biographies are phenomenal. Not Joe Blogs down the road biographies wrote their own book. I'm on about people you aspire to be like. You might realize you don't want to be like them when you read the book, but they will give you insights as well into their brain and how they're thinking and why they do things a certain way. So I think autobiographies are great as well, but they have to resonate with you. There's no point me saying read Richard Branson's, because if you don't like Richard Branson, it's not going to resonate. But he was a book I read when I was 16, I think, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's not even got, he's not even academically clever. And look at him, he's gone on to do this. So I think I learned a lot from that book as well, if I think about it.
Thank you. Zoe's Law. So do you want to share about what that's about and how people can get involved as well, please?
So my sister, in the midst of the first lockdown, the first month, she got diagnosed with terminal cancer. It is actually founded negligence. I'm allowed to say that now because it's been founded by the GPs. But the reality was she went to the GPs 4 times in 5 years and was just brushed off saying, "No, it's fine, you're young, nothing wrong with you, blah, blah, blah." And she had terminal cancer, which was from melanoma. It was a skin tag. The last doctor she saw told her to go and get it shaved off, which is the worst thing you can do. So the long story short is actually because of COVID, she worked in the radiology team at the hospital when they were scanning people's lungs for COVID. Her boss said, "Oh, you've got symptoms of COVID, so should we scan you and see if you've got something going on?" And he just walked in crying. He just said, "Well, look, and they've seen a lot of cancer working in the radiology team, so she knew she was going to die as soon as she saw that." And the reality is she did die 55 days later. So she was only 26. She's got 2 little boys. God, time's flying. How would they have been then? They would have been 6 and 8. And the reality is it's got founded in the report we just received a few weeks ago that had she been dealt with properly, she would have had an 86.7% chance of living till she's 80. So the reality is Zoe should be here. She should be alive, but she's dead. And so we're trying to get the law changed, first of all, that any skin tag removed is legally has to be tested, whether that's by a beautician or a GP or whatever. They should not be allowed to be taken off without being tested, because that at least gives you an opportunity of living. Don't get me wrong, if you shaved it off with a beautician, it's like a willow tree. If you shave it off, it just shoots out, but at least you've got a chance. And then the other part is awareness. When my sister went and saw the doctor for the 3rd time, we all were like, okay, well, they're the specialists, not us. The reality is, your body. And if you are genuinely concerned that you've not got the right answers, you should keep pushing it. You should keep going further. And you don't accept that as the gospel truth. And that's the reality. So, yeah, unfortunately, my sister died in 2020, far before she should have died. And obviously that leaves a lot of trauma, a lot of grief for lots of people around her. So, yeah, that's the backlog. So that's why we created Zoe's Law. Just trying to get the law changed. And it's been far harder than we thought to get the signatures. We got loads when it first launched. And it sort of just slowed down so significantly. People always share her story, they cry about her story, they talk about her story. But we can see when people don't sign. So they go on the Zoe's Law page to sign the petition. And when they get asked to put their details in, personal details, I think there's a mindset of, oh, I'll do it later, or I'll come back to that. They share it, but they don't sign it. So it's a bit frustrating. So really what we could do, if anyone listening, is to actually go on Zoe's Law, Zoe Panayi, the same surname as me, obviously, and actually just sign that petition and share it with your peers and friends and colleagues and whatever. Just ask them to sign it and share it, because irrelevant if it's my sister, but no one should really have to experience that, especially knowing they could have lived.
Okay. If you send me the link, we'll put it out on all the LinkedIn and wherever it goes as well.
That'd be amazing. I'll send you the link tree, because it's got a video there that explains her story far better than I could.
Okay. Thank you. You know, I've been something similar through my late wife, so I know it's incredibly challenging. But what you're doing is amazing, and you know, I'm sure your sister's going to be incredibly proud that you're making a difference to other people. Final question. So, if I could tell you one thing, what would it be? So, you've got an audience here.
Oh, yeah. This is a tough one, really. It sounds cheesy, but it probably leads on from what we just discussed about my sister, and that's value your time. And what I mean by that is understand who and what you're spending time with and why, and really understanding your why. Because when my sister died, I used to work abroad 2 weeks a month every month, and to me, that was normal for my family, friends, and career and whatever. But actually, the reality is that 6 months a year. I'm far more a family man than I am a businessman. So I missed out on so much time with my little sister. And even my stepdaughter, you know, she missed out a lot of time from me in those early years, and other people. So I think you've got to understand where to value your time. Doesn't mean don't go and do things. It's just really understand the value of your time, and don't be spending time with people that don't add any value to your life. There's lots of fake friendships and fake acquaintances out there. Don't waste that time, because you could go and get knocked over by a car and die. And it does sound extreme, but that's the reality that I learned. So if someone could have told me that back when I was 17, because no one really did, then maybe I would have listened, maybe I wouldn't have. But I could, if I could turn back time, I would have liked someone to at least try and point that out to me.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for your time. Thank you for being an amazing guest and sharing so much. If people want to get hold of you, Charlie, how do they do that, please?
To be fair, the best way nowadays is my Instagram, because that's where I tend to check most. So if you go on my Instagram, which is literally Charlie_Panayi, nice and easy, or LinkedIn, either or. I'm more likely to respond quicker on Instagram, because I get far too many messages on LinkedIn. but yeah, either way, or just ring Red Squirrel Property Shop. They're fine with me.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please like it. Please share it. Please tag people in that you feel that can make a difference. Please, let's help Charlie with Zoe's Law as well. So sign the petition and make a difference. And thanks very much. Until the next time. Thank you all.
No, thanks for having me.